Come on up, and we'll hear from the crew. I They'll take questions and answers from people here, and then also questions from those of you who are listening on Zoom, and then we'll end up with a song. But before we do hear from the crew, just want to mention that they have brought wonderful stuff, materials, written stuff, and these beautiful, look at this, T-shirts. Whoa, yeah, T-shirts, and there is also a donation box back there. So thank you very much.
Go ahead, there's a question right there. Well, we should do a little bit first. Just a second. Right, so before we go to questions and comments and discussions, I would like to catch you up with what happened since the film. You're kind of familiar with it, but I just want to make sure that we're all on the same page. So the Golden Rule was headed to the Marshall Islands, Okinawa, and Japan when we went to Hawaii, and we sailed around the Hawaiian Islands for 2 years. And we were ready to head on to the Marshall Islands. But at that time, it was March of 2020, we got completely caught by surprise and had to cancel the trip due to COVID. So we laid low for a while, brought the Golden Rule back to California, and finally decided that what we would do would be to fulfill the dream of the people that worked for 5 long years to restore the Golden Rule, which was to bring the Golden Rule and its message of nuclear disarmament and other nuclear matters, that education to all the navigable waterways of the United States. And since we'd done the West Coast and Hawaii, what that was left was the rest of the whole eastern half of the United States. So we trucked the Golden Rule to Minneapolis with the intention of doing what boaters call the Great Loop. And usually you start somewhere along maybe the Mississippi River and you go around Tipple, Florida, up somewhere up in the Northeast, get yourselves into the Great Lakes and then come back out. Usually the trip is about 6,000 miles. Well, Minneapolis isn't on that Great Loop because you can't get there from the north. Lake Superior down is too small for a sailboat like ours. So you don't usually start there, but a Veterans for Peace chapter there is very strong, and they insisted that we come there first. So since we had to put her on a truck anyway, that's what we did. And so we went down the Mississippi River. We intended to do the whole Mississippi, but the drought caused us to divert over into the Ohio, Tennessee, and Tombigbee rivers to get all the way down to the Gulf of Mexico. Also, most boaters don't just take off from Florida and visit Cuba, and Jerry will probably talk with us about why'd we go to Cuba and how's that related to what's going on in Ukraine regarding the Cuban Missile Crisis and Ukraine. Yeah, and so now we're headed up the East Coast. What we're going to do is go to Bath, Maine, north of Portland, where Bath Iron Works makes nuclear-armed boats, right? We've already been to Groton, Connecticut, where they make nuclear-armed submarines. So yes, electric boat, right? General Electric boat. And then we're going to come back down through New York City, up the Hudson Canal, or the Hudson River, the Erie Canal, and the Oswego Canal is how we'll get into the Great Lakes. And we'll sail through the Great Lakes and end up in Chicago at the end of September. So this is a 13-month voyage covering about 11,000 miles, and we'll visit over 100 cities and towns. And what we do is what we've been doing right here. We have welcome ceremonies at the boat. We give educational presentations. We talk about anything nuclear or regarding the mission of Veterans for Peace that you all would like to talk about. This is obviously very important to Veterans for Peace. Massachusetts Peace Action has been a great ally in getting these programs going here. And we often end up with the mayors welcoming us. We had a whole state welcomed us. The whole state of Massachusetts welcomed the Golden Rule. That was pretty, wow. And I think Rhode Island may have also. Anyway, this has been an incredible place to be up here in the Northeast. So I would like to invite the crew each to talk for a couple of minutes, and then I'd like to turn it over for general discussion. So what I'd like to do is have people give a comment or an item for discussion, and then you'll see from what the crew is saying that we have a lot of experienced speakers on this crew. This is very unusual that we have so much talent just for the crew members that are operating the boat that are also available to give talks with people. So let's see, I'll start with Debbie, our captain.
Thank you, Helen. It's been an honor and a privilege to be captain of the Golden Rule and to learn about her history and how amazing it is that, to bring this message of educating people. That's what I do. I have a PhD in chemistry. I educate people in Hawaii now, where I live. And we talk about sustainability and try to get people educated about how we can move towards the future. And I didn't really, quite frankly, deal with the nuclear disarmament issue very much. I'm all for nuclear disarmament, and now I understand that what the Golden Rule does is bring visibility and lets people know this is really important for us to know and take action and get over the fear that, if we give up our guns or our nuclear weapons, that's going to be a problem. And I think it's great that all of you come with peace and kindness in your hearts, so that really helps assuage the fears of the people that would oppose reducing nuclear arms. And so it's been wonderful to see. We've got great hosts. I really thank all of you for your help with the, putting the crew up, bringing us around, setting everything up. It's been wonderful, and I'm just so happy to be here. And I'm also from Maine, so I'm really happy that I'm going to be going up there. And at this point, I'd like to hand it over to First Mate Bill Good. Thank you.
So I am from Ohio, and I too am an educator, much younger people that I teach, but I'm also an activist in my community. And so when I set out at the beginning, I figured I would be going around doing this and teaching other people about the risk of nuclear war and nuclear energy. And so far it's been kind of the opposite, that I've been the one learning, and everywhere we've gone I've met these really smart, incredible people that have great ideas that I'm kind of absorbing like a sponge that I can take back, not just on like nuclear weapons, but on all kinds of issues, social justice and research and the environment. And so it's been a great opportunity for me to learn and gain some ideas that I can take back to my community. So thank you all for your ideas and your contributions. Keep up your great work, and for welcoming us here to Boston.
I thought I'd just start by reading a little piece of the Nobel Peace Prize acceptance speech that Setsuko Thurlow gave. We saw that on the film, the two of them receiving the Nobel Peace Prize for the International Campaign to Abolish Nuclear Weapons Treaty on the Prohibition of Nuclear Weapons. Setsuko writes about August 6, 1945, when she was at home in Hiroshima. The bomb went off. She was caught under the rubble of her school. As I crawled out, the ruins were on fire. Most of my classmates in that building were burned to death alive. I saw all around me utter, unimaginable devastation. Processions of ghostly figures shuffled by, grotesquely wounded people. They were bleeding, burnt, blackened, and swollen. Parts of their bodies were missing. Flesh and skin hung from their bones, some with their eyeballs hanging in their hands, some with their bellies burst open, their intestines hanging out. The foul stench of burnt human flesh filled the air. Thus, with one bomb, my beloved city was obliterated. Most of its residents were civilians who were incinerated, vaporized, carbonized, among them members of my own family and 351 of my schoolmates. In the weeks, months, and years that followed, many thousand more would die, often in random and mysterious ways from the delayed effects of radiation. Still to this day, radiation is killing survivors. Whenever I remember Hiroshima, the first image that comes to my mind is of my 4-year-old nephew, E.G., his little body transformed into an unrecognizable melted chunk of flesh. He kept begging for water in a faint voice until his death released him from agony. To me, he came to represent all the innocent children of the world, threatened as they are at this very moment by nuclear weapons. Every second of every day, nuclear weapons endanger everyone we love and everything we hold dear. We must not tolerate this insanity any longer. Thank you, Setsuko Thurlow. And so just thinking the Treaty on the Prohibition of Nuclear Weapons, thanks, has changed the global conversation on nuclear weapons from theories about deterrence and, capabilities of intercontinental ballistic missiles and strategies of nuclear war. It's changed the conversation to what would nuclear war do to human beings and to the planet. And the treaty was put together overwhelmingly by women and people in the global south who are beyond outraged that there are 9 countries on the face of the planet that can destroy the planet whenever they desire to do so, that politicians in 9 countries can make that decision to kill everyone and everything. And so that's part of what the Golden Rule is doing now, too, as you saw in the film, is this promoting of the Treaty on the Prohibition of Nuclear Weapons. It's actually the first treaty that would actually do that, and it's crafted for multilateral disarmament, not for unilateral disarmament. And the key really is the United States. The United States has never said that we would be willing to get rid of our nuclear weapons. Russia has said that more than once. Other countries have them because we have them. So we're in a really unique position in the United States. If we can get our government to say that we're finally willing to give them up, if everybody else gives them up, we'll do it too, that would be the key. And so that's going to mean that we need to educate people, and we need to press our legislators, and we need to be in the street in protest and in nonviolent civil resistance to apply that pressure to do what we can to save the world. Thanks.
Thank you. Thank you for sharing that. I'm Zoe from California, and I've been active with the Golden Rule since 2016, crewing on and off, and I just rejoined yesterday to crew for 2.5 months because I grew up in Michigan and I want to sail the Great Lakes. And I wanted to be here up on the East Coast as well, so I'm combining that together. And I've been involved in the peace movement since I was 17 years old, so almost 45 years ago, and I was involved with the Nuclear Weapons Freeze campaign then, which I found out yesterday was started here. So that is so great. So yeah, I've been involved in various ways over the years, and in 2015 I did my first sailing venture to get into sailing, and then in 2016 I found out about the Golden Rule and how great to combine sailing with peace activism. So that's where I'm here. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Jerry Condon. I serve on the board of directors of Veterans for Peace nationally, and am president of our Golden Rule Committee. And along with Helen, my partner, we have been at this for the last 8 years. It's been pretty wonderful. And then this, on the Great Loop itself, it's been like 9 months now. Since we began in Minneapolis in September. And so we sailed down the Mississippi, as was mentioned, had many incredible, wonderful stops along the way. Too many to mention, hardly to remember them all. Among the most amazing was our stop in Dubuque, Iowa, where we were welcomed by the Marshall Islands community there. There's 800 to 1,000 Marshallese living there. And they hadn't really heard about the Golden Rule before. It wasn't part of their story. But when they were approached by Art Roach from Veterans for Peace in Dubuque, who had a very close relationship with that community, and he told them the story, and they immediately were very excited and were very eager to welcome us. We had the most beautiful arrival there. We were escorted, several sailboats escorted us into the harbor, and on the dock were a group of Marshallese women in traditional dress singing these beautiful Marshallese harmonies as the boat arrived, and there was not a dry eye in the place. And we celebrated with the Marshallese for 2 days, food and dance and music, and it was just amazing. And the publicity that was generated then also made the community in Dubuque more aware of why are these people here in the first place. So it was a win-win for everybody, and we continue to try to keep a strong relationship with the Marshallese people. We've joined together with them in various actions in Hawaii, and there are a number of communities on the West Coast that we're in touch with as well. They have a huge community in Arkansas. I don't know if they have any communities up in New England, but you know, their island was destroyed. Many of the islands were destroyed. The radiation poisoning is still so prevalent that they cannot grow food, they cannot eat the fish. They're dependent on, you know, canned goods being shipped from the United States. And to add insult to injury, climate change is now drowning their islands. They're starting to lose more and more ground. So, and when we were in New York recently, we actually the Mexican mission to the United Nations invited us to meet with 13 other UN missions. So it was an incredible meeting. People from Indonesia, Malaysia, Vietnam, Cuba, South Africa, and Australia. Was Australia there? I think it was. Austria, no, not Australia. Anyway, quite a few different nations were there, and we had the most amazing visit with them, and they told us, you know, usually we're accustomed to communicating state to state, they said. In other words, to our government. They said it's such a breath of fresh air to be meeting with citizen activists. We had a really good discussion there about how we could to cooperate to build more support for the Treaty on the Prohibition of Nuclear Weapons. And afterwards, we had a 2-hour visit with the UN ambassador from the Marshall Islands. It was a really wonderful visit. It was disturbing, too, in some ways, when they told us that, you know, despite the high cancer rate that they continue to have in the Marshall Islands, there's no chemotherapy available there. And they have a lot of, because there's hardly any jobs, a lot of the young people are joining the U.S. military. So they have a lot of veterans on the island with health issues, but no VA clinic. So you think the least that the U.S. could do, after having dropped 67 bombs on them and destroyed their culture, their livelihood, the least they could do is take better care of them, but that's not happening. Just amazing. So it's a continuing crime. So anyway, we did travel. We continued on down the Mississippi, and the drought was so bad last year that the waters were very low, and the Mississippi was narrow, and it became dangerous for us. So we actually grounded the boat over a dozen times, and without any serious damage, and usually some pretty clever ways of getting ungrounded and moving on. But still, when we got to the lower Mississippi, it was just too much, and plus they have these big barges traveling on there, and it would be really hard to get out of the way of them without going aground. So we decided to divert through the normal way that boaters do the Great Loop. Below St. Louis, we went into the Ohio River, the Tennessee River, the Tombigbee River, and ended up in Mobile, Alabama, on the Gulf of Mexico. Then went to Pensacola and Tampa, Florida, And we realized a little bit earlier, looking at our schedule, we're going to be in Key West, Florida on December 31st, and that's only 90 miles from where? From Havana, Cuba, where in 1962 there was almost a terrible worldwide devastating nuclear war over the so-called Cuban Missile Crisis. We thought it was very important to remind the world of that and to pay respect to that. So we made arrangements to travel to Cuba, and it was remarkably easy to do so. We were able to travel despite the U.S. blockade of Cuba, we were able to travel under a general license for educational purposes, and we notified the Coast Guard we were going, and we didn't have any, Cuba was very happy to have us. We didn't have any problem going or returning. We had a wonderful experience in Cuba. We went as part of an educational program where we learned a lot about Cuban arts and culture, which is, of course, extremely rich. We had a terrific time. We had a press conference there, which was very well attended by Cuban media and international media, and even some U.S. media. I think the Wall Street Journal was there, Associated Press was there, and they didn't cover it. But they were there, and the Cuban media, of course, did cover it, and we were at the top of the television news that night. And then the next day when we traveled to Pinar del Rio in western Cuba, which had been hit by this terrible hurricane in September, destroying 10,000 homes. We took some humanitarian aid that we'd carried down with us to deliver, and they rolled out the red carpet for us, and we walked into the big conference room they had there to meet with them, and there was a big picture of the Golden Rule was on the monitor, and they were just really impressed and grateful for our visit, and that was great. Yeah, so she's getting me to wind up here. So, get into the point. So we came back from Cuba realizing that adding to our messaging that we really need to call for an end to the U.S. blockade of Cuba, because 60 years later, after this nuclear, what was the cause of that near nuclear war? Was that the Soviet Union had placed nuclear weapons in Cuba, targeting U.S. cities. And why did Cuba allow that to happen? Because the U.S. was determined to overthrow the Cuban Revolution, was making multiple attempts to assassinate Fidel Castro, had sponsored an invasion of Cuba. And why did the Soviet Union want to put missiles in Cuba? Because the U.S. had put missiles in Turkey, targeting Russia, near Russia's borders. So the way that nuclear war was avoided was, first of all, President Kennedy and Nikita Khrushchev both freaked out, thinking, oh my God, look how close we are to the unthinkable. And they got very serious, and they negotiated seriously, and they came up with a way that they could back out of that situation. And what they did was that the Soviet Union agreed to withdraw its missiles from Cuba, and the U.S. agreed not to invade Cuba. But there was a side agreement that was done silently for domestic political reasons in the U.S. Kennedy didn't want it to be known that he also agreed to remove U.S. nuclear missiles from Turkey, and that was done quietly several months later. So part of the reason I tell that story is because we kind of have a somewhat analogous situation. Some people call it a reverse Cuban Missile Crisis in Ukraine today, because it's a very complex and complicated war. There's many different opinions about the nature of it, but certainly a major part of it is the fact that the U.S. has moved and NATO have moved hostile military forces, including nuclear weapon systems, close to Russia's borders, something that the U.S. certainly would not allow Russia to do. on the Canadian border or the Mexican border with the United States. So many people, many experts, nuclear disarmament experts and people who follow foreign policy and defense policy closely agree that we're probably closer to a nuclear war today than we were in 1962 with the Cuban Missile Crisis. At any rate, it's hard to talk about getting rid of nuclear weapons and supporting the Treaty of Prohibition of Nuclear Weapons without confronting the fact that we're on the verge of nuclear war right now, and we all need to support the efforts to encourage our government to, instead of escalating the war with more and more weapons, to support a ceasefire and negotiations to end that war before it ends us. So on that sober note, I'll pass the microphone and we can have some happier talk.
So I would also like to invite questions or comments about Holtec dumping radioactive water from decommissioning nuclear power plants into the bay, or anything else you want to talk about nuclear energy or nuclear weapons, or uranium mining, or anything to do with, if we don't get rid of war, we can't solve the climate crisis, anything like that. So I think I'd like to turn questions and comments over to the audience.
Hi, I can't stick on subject. These are long-time questions from me because you are vets for peace, because you're vets. World War I and World War II, a lot of men mainly refused to kill. They could not kill. They believed in the golden rule and kindness. What is in the training since World War II that has made it more possible for people to go out and kill? And what is the cure that you attained and others like you have attained? Number 3 question, sorry. Hiroshima and Nagasaki were socked with a lot of radiation. They evidently plated over some of the contamination. Why are these people who are living in these great cities now not have, or do they, is a better question, do they have high cancer rates? I haven't found an answer to that. Thank you.
The first one, I think Jerry could speak to.
Yeah, on the first question, I'll say, well, a lot of people are unaware of how much resistance there was to World War I in particular, and I think maybe not as much so, but maybe more than we know, to World War II. But certainly, there was massive resistance to the Vietnam War by soldiers, including soldiers in Vietnam. I myself was one of tens of thousands of soldiers who refused to fight in Vietnam and deserted from the army. I spent 6 years in Sweden and Canada fighting against the war and for amnesty for war resistors, and there were many of us. And then the resistance actually by soldiers in Vietnam who either refused at a certain point to carry weapons, or in some cases even committed acts of sabotage, even killed their own officers with grenades, because there's a practice called fragging. I mean, the U.S. military, and plus a lot of them were addicted to heroin, so the whole military was falling apart in Vietnam, and that's a large part of the reason why the U.S. finally had to end that war, along with, of course, the growing peace anti-war movement in the United States and the resistance, of course, of the Vietnamese people. So resistance continues. However, they did find there was a study done, some kind of sociology researcher was embedded with U.S. troops in, I believe it was World War II or World War I. I think World War II. Somebody will know this story. But they found, to their surprise, that even in a combat situation where they were being shot at, many of them were unwilling to kill. They were shooting over the heads of the enemy, or not firing their weapons at all. And so this was a shocking discovery for the U.S. military, and they did take some steps to have kind of massive fire so that no individual felt he was personally responsible for killing somebody. They did change tactics to some extent. And of course, we also now have a situation where we have an all-volunteer army that's more of an economic draft. And so there is also, because there's no draft, there's also less resistance in the military. But it's a good question you ask, and it's just important. The other thing that's really important is that when there is resistance in the military, first of all, we have to really educate our children about the reality of military life, and a lot of veterans are involved in what they call truth in recruiting or counter-recruiting efforts. But for those who go in, they really need our support. And especially if they decide to say no and resist, the more support there is from in civilian, the more resistance there is in the military. And the resistance, the mass resistance in the military during Vietnam was directly proportionate to the mass anti-war movement in the society overall. So we all have to be against war. We all have to be resisting war, and then the soldiers will also be able to resist.
And contamination in Hiroshima, Nagasaki, anybody?
Somebody back there thinks he knows.
Okay. It's just a mechanical fact of the way nuclear reactions work that if you want to produce long-lived radioisotopes, you have to expose them for, or have a neutron flux that lasts for a significant amount of time. A nuclear blast is over in a fraction of a second. Long-lived nuclear isotopes are not produced in large quantities in a nuclear blast. So usually within about a month after a nuclear blast, it's not too bad to go back to the blast site. It's quite different with nuclear reactors, which have a sustained neutron flux and produce large quantities of the much longer-lived actinides. So it's just a fact of the way these things work. I'm not advocating, obviously, for either kind of neutron flux, but that might answer your question anyway.
There is extensive data available through the Gender Radiation Impact Project, goes by the acronym GRIP. And you'll see there especially the impact on women and girls. That also was very influential in the TPNW, so that for the first time a treaty includes gender impact phrases, clauses. Thank you.
It's great to know. And you know, we're not the experts up here. We're carrying the message as we can. We try to lift up the voices of many longtime anti-nuclear activists and people who are working on various related issues wherever we go. So we'd be just as happy to hear your comments and hear your observations about the work that you're undertaking, as well as asking questions of us. So feel free.
Yeah, I had a comment about. I had a comment about like the Pilgrim 2, the dumping the water in the bay, and I grew up, like a half a mile from there, and it happened like I think I was in my early 20s, and of course, I mean everybody knows this. What they would say, it was all about, oh, there's going to be great jobs. We're creating jobs. But anyway, one thing that I wanted to say, before they did that, the place where they did it, we could kind of see it from the beach where we were, and we never saw any lobster traps really close, but as soon as it came online, the water right out there was warmer, and so people started putting their lobster traps out, and for decades you would see all these boats out there, you know, picking up their lobster traps from very, very close to this nuclear plant. And anyway, and there are anecdotal evidence of a lot of people. I never spent full time there, but a lot of the full-time residents, that there was, you know, very suspicious health health problems. And anyway, I'm really happy that people are working on that issue. And I want to do a shout out. We have a conscientious objector from the Vietnam War right here. So shout out to those guys.
I just. Oh, okay.
Okay, my name is Tim Havel. I'm a member in good standing of Mass Peace Action, my main claim to fame. Since you brought up the subject of climate and war, I thought I'd bring up a connection which I've lately been thinking a lot about, which is, and it's almost never said. The fact is, if we do ever stop climate change, that means discontinuing the use of fossil fuels. That means they're no longer widely available or abundant or cheap. We won World War II and also to some degree World War I by cutting off the access to supply of oil. Essentially, that was our main strategy against Japan, and it also played a big role in Europe. The military is extremely aware of this. And even the resources of the Pentagon are not anywhere near sufficient to go out and make the huge capital investments necessary in order to develop new oil and gas wells, particularly in deep sea conditions or on the Arctic northern plains or things like that. So during World War II, this country was essentially 100% energy independent. And that's no longer the case. Therefore, the military not only guards the Suez Canal and many other important oil sources, they are aware of the fact that if we do stop climate change, because there is no substitute for the internal combustion engine in terms of its power to weight ratio, which is what allows you to have attack helicopters, tanks, and many other, fighters and many other important kinds of weapons. These weapons would essentially become obsolete because even though they could probably get enough oil to field a few of them, that oil would be vastly more expensive. And you could try to go to biofuels or synfuels, but those are also vastly more expensive. So essentially, it would be very close to unilateral disarmament if society gives up fossil fuels. So there is no constituency, no industry in the country or in the world that is more dependent on fossil fuels than the military. Not cement, not steel, not nothing. They know this. And I have a slide on my cell phone, which I'd be glad to pass around to anyone who's interested, of a talk I recently heard by a bunch of a retired Navy captain who had just written a white paper for the upper brass of the Pentagon, stressing the fact that we need to develop our domestic energy supplies to become independent again, and essentially to do the exact opposite of combating climate change. But you don't actually, so I have a smoking gun that I've actually held in my hand or been in the same room with. But you don't need that. You just need to really understand how war works, what the logistics are. And you can see that it has to be this way. So the two issues are linked at the hip. It's not just that the military uses a lot of oil and gas, it's that they're utterly addicted to it. Thank you.
The gentleman in the front, here.
Oh, I can. Go ahead. I have one. First of all, yesterday was a great day in Boston. I think it was one of the best peace rallies since the pandemic. Really, we've had such a big crowd. We gave out the most flyers we've done. I've been out in the street for many years, even through the pandemic, and it was wonderful to see such a variety of people out there giving out the flyers, and this is very important work. But I have a simple question to ask. How do you pick the crew members?
Well, they fill out a crew application form, and based on a good mixture of skills for each segment and their availability, then we just kind of...
You have to be good looking. Easy to get along with. The captains have to be really, really strong and very experienced, as they all have been. We've been very fortunate. We've been blessed with great captains and great crews.
Any Zoom?
Yeah. Peter?
We're going to take a Zoom question.
There's a lot of questions people are asking. How can they screen the film in their area?
Go to our website, VFP, as in Veterans for Peace, VFPGoldenRule.org. And if you're on a computer, in the middle column towards the bottom, you'll find the documentary links, one to the 25-minute and one to the 10-minute version of the film.
You can download them for free.
You can also, once you get the screen open in Vimeo where the films reside, underneath that is a download button. You can grab them and use them if you want.
Sir.
Yeah, it's a great film. It's 5.5 years old, but it still stands up. Yes, thank you. Yeah, it's a wonderful film, isn't it? It's 5.5 years old, but it still holds up very well. We're really grateful to the filmmaker and producer who brought that to us for free.
I'm Peter Metz with Mass Peace Action. Two things. The film, I must say, any of you who saw it tonight for the first time were probably moved like I was the first time, which was almost to tears. It is available for free showing by any group under any circumstances, including your local community access television station. And so one of our activists here in the Boston area, Veteran for Peace at Winthrop, who hosted the crew on Saturday night when they came in and found the boat of birth there, arranged for it to be shown multiple times. Actually, community access television stations are hungry for material to show the film multiple times with no problem. So there is no, you don't have to get permission or anything else. It's open property. But if you have any questions, anyway, second point that I wanted to make is one that makes me both hopeful and discouraged. Joseph Biden knows more about nuclear weapons than any president we've ever had, and probably more than any president we're very likely to have in our lifetimes. He started working on nuclear weapons issues on the third year of his senatorship. He ended up negotiating with the Soviet Union for them to fix their performance under one provision of the first nuclear weapons reduction treaty in his third year in the U.S. Senate, and he's followed the thing ever since. As vice president, and this is the hopeful part, as vice president, he gave a speech at the very end of the Biden administration, trying to kind of lay a carpet for the Trump administration, hoping that they would step up to it, in which he gave a long speech about nuclear weapons policy. But in it, he said two very important sentences that I have committed to memory. If we want a world without nuclear weapons, the United States must lead the way. And he didn't say could or should or anything else. He said must. And if you watch the speech, he's very convicted on that. And then he went on to say, and because we are the only nation to have ever used nuclear weapons, we have a great moral responsibility to lead the charge. Now, those, as far as I'm concerned, those ought to be our watchwords. The disappointing thing is, here he is, he's president. And he hasn't shown any inclination in public anywhere or anywhere in his administration to follow that. So it's our job, I think, to create an environment in which he knows he has the support to do it. Because right now he doesn't feel supported. Go ask any stranger on the street about what the threat of nuclear weapons is, and they'll say, what do you mean? And so they're not telling Joe Biden, you made a great speech 6 years ago go deliver on it. So there's this little handful of us. That's our job, I think, or at least that's our best opportunity. But it is discouraging that all this time has gone by since he made those great words and that nothing has yet happened. So we just have to change that. And now is the time. We won't have another chance. So as Jerry says, this is a dire threat right now, but I'd like to see it as also an opportunity for dire hope.
Well, it should be a wake-up call for sure. Yeah, we were disappointed with Biden because when he was running for president, he actually indicated that he was thinking seriously, at least, about declaring a no first use policy. So we waited a long time for his nuclear posture review to come out, so long that we decided Veterans for Peace decided to put out our own nuclear posture review, which actually the Golden Rule crew delivered to every single Senate office and congressional office when we were in Washington, D.C. last month. But yeah, his policy finally did come out, and he still has a first use policy. The U.S. will use nuclear weapons to defend itself, to defend its allies, and to even defend some non-allies. So kind of no holds barred, and that is the policy of the United States. And it's also the policy of Russia to use nuclear weapons first if they feel that their existence as a nation state is a threat. So a lot of people say, well, that darn Putin, he's threatening nuclear war. Well, I think to some extent he is, but he's also kind of telling us, this is the situation, folks. We have two countries here who both are willing to use nuclear weapons first, and they're confronting each other in an ever-escalating war in Ukraine, which if it gets out of hand, that's the direction it could go. That's why, once again, it's really important for us. The Veterans for Peace Nuclear Posture Review concludes by saying that unless there's a real change in U.S. foreign policy, we'll probably never get rid of our nuclear weapons. We have to turn away from a policy of domination and exploitation and trying to be the big dog in every corner of the globe to a policy that respects the sovereignty of other nations and works for the good of all humanity, not just for the good of the 1% in the United States. And that's a long hill to climb. So we've got some super challenges with these twin existential threats now of climate crisis and nuclear war. It's a question of which one's going to get us first. At any rate, I think that we will have a stronger movement if we work on those things together, especially since that there are a fair number of younger activists that actually are involved in the climate change movement. Well, so far they don't seem to have caught on to the fact that they're also threatened by nuclear war. I want to see the Greta Thunbergs take up the anti-nuclear cause, then we'll have some interesting worldwide movement. And I think that can and will happen, and it should be a priority of all of us to work together on those two existential threats.
Okay. I just have something really brief to say. I want to thank you all from so many organizations here, all the things that people really are doing on in so many areas. We have people from Rotary, we have people from WILF, we have people from Mass Peace Action, from Vets for Peace, all across, and people who are doing things that I haven't even mentioned. But just want to mention that here in Massachusetts, we're also, aside from everything else we're doing, we're also working on legislation. And so we have some bills in front of our State House, and you're going to be there tomorrow at a rally about divesting from nuclear weapons, a Back from the Brink resolution, and a connection between nuclear weapons and climate, and making that connection on a statewide basis. So there is a lot we're doing, and we also have a campaign, aside from a campaign about Ukraine, we have a campaign that is Twin Threats campaign, just as you're saying. And so, you know, I look at this song about Phoenix and the Golden Rule, and it ends, it's up to me, it's up to you to do unto others as you would have them do unto others as you would have them do unto you. And I want to thank the crew of the Golden Rule for being here tonight. And Dean's going to close us out.
Yeah. Thanks to all of you. You honor us with your presence. And yeah. Picture of the crew and do I get to be in the picture too?
Yeah, you can be in the
Oh,
picture.
lucky me. Lucky me. Here we go.
All right. Okay, perfect. Thank you.
Cole, get up there. Yes, come up here. Come on.
Yeah.
Pretty soon we'll have to have the whole.
We'll have to have
You gotta widen the lens. Have everyone.
Okay, smile, you're on camera.
I think somebody has to take a picture of the audience.
Okay.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. What a good-looking crew.
All right. Thank you all so much. And if you have the bandwidth, I will grace you, hopefully, with one final song.
You might want to have Helen join us. She's the pro with that song.
With which song?
The Phoenix and the Golden Rule?
Oh, no, I don't know that one.
Not that one, okay.
I don't know the Phoenix and the Golden Rule. I have to learn it after experiencing y'all tonight. Couple just last things, just a petition for the Holy Land 5 as you walk out. There's also a donation basket. There's all kinds of things for sale in this room, including lots of books. We inherited a mountain of books. There's Palestine products in the back from Olive Branch Fair Trade store in Martha's Vineyard. There's products from El Salvador, and there's CDs, and there's our own brand of fair trade coffee. And to the Vets for Peace, I just want to send you just a really great piece of news. Jim Casteris, who took care of this building for 30 years, and now at age 93 lives with his 2 daughters in Maine. It'd be cool if he could come down to Bath. One of them lives in Appleton and the other one in Winterport, Maine. But I was out of touch with him for about 6 months, and just got back in touch with Jim. And he was just so active in the Smetley Butlers, and it was at every demonstration and every action. So I just send you greetings from Jim, and if any of you want to call him, I have his contact information now. Fastidious, honorable member of this church for so many years. I come and stand at every door, but none can hear my silent tread. I knock and yet remain unseen, for I am dead, for I am dead. I'm only 7, though I died in Hiroshima long ago. I'm 7 now as I was then. When children die, they do not grow. My hair was scorched by swirling flame. My eyes grew dim, my eyes grew blind. Death came and turned my bones to dust, and that was scattered by the wind. I need no fruit, I need no rice, I need no sweets, not even bread. I ask for nothing for myself, for I am dead, for I am dead. All that I ask is that for peace you work today, so that the children of the world may live and grow and laugh and play. Atlantic and Pacific flow, the Great Lakes to the Gulf of Mexico. The land between sustains us all. To cherish her is our urgent call. Arise, arise, I see the future in your eyes. To a more perfect union we aspire, and lift our voices from the fire. We reach these shores from distant lands. We came with hungry hearts and hands. Some came by force and some by will, to the auction block and the darkened mill. Arise, arise, I see the future in your eyes. To a more perfect union we aspire, and lift our voices from the fire. We died in your fields and factories, strange fruit hanging from the poplar trees. An old coat hanger in a room somewhere, a trail of tears, an electric chair. Arise, arise, I see the future in your eyes. To a more perfect union we aspire, and lift our voices from the fire. Ooh, 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 ooh. And our great responsibility to be guardians of our liberty, till tyrants bend to the people's dreams, and justice flows like a mighty stream. Arise, arise, I see the future in your eyes. To a more perfect union we aspire, and lift our voices from the fire. We lift our voices from the fire. Thank you very much. Thank you for being here tonight. Que viva the golden rule. Que viva, you all say, que viva. Long live the golden rule.
I have, yes, you all have words to the Ballad of the Phoenix and the Golden Rule, and I would like to have you help me to sing it if you can. It's hopefully we won't lose each other. And I need to get the previous song out of my mind. In 58, wrong key. In 58, when we set sail, I didn't know that we'd end up in jail. Oh, I've been called worse than a fool for sailing on the Golden Rule. From San Pedro, we headed west on waves of a peaceful protest, trimmed our sails to the wind, and prayed the bomb would not be used again. The Golden Rule, the Golden Rule, words we all learned in Sunday school. Do unto others as you would have them do unto you. The Phoenix crew, about halfway through, both our boats moored in Honolulu, We agreed to do our best to try to stop the nuclear tests. Neither ship did give way, but trials then kept us at bay. We made it just part way through, and now the rest is up to you. It's up to me, it's up to you, to do unto as you would have them do. Do unto others as you would have them do unto you. 58, when we set sail, I didn't know that we'd end up in jail. And I've been called worse than a fool for sailing on the Golden Rule. It's up to me, it's up to you, to do unto as you would have them do. Do unto others as you would have them do unto you. Do unto others as you would have them do unto you. This song was playing as the Golden Rule was launched back into the waters after a 5-year rebuild, and we all cried. It was amazing. Thank you.
Thank you all. If you would just be able to pick up a little bit after you and put some chairs in stacks, that would really help as we go out. A final thanks to Amar Ahmad for doing the tech tonight. And a big thanks, although he already went home, to Luis Guzman, who prepared our food for us tonight and will be washing our dishes.